feel that there is an assault on people of color in this state, in this country, and we need a state that's going to be bold and visionary and set itself apart. And I'm very excited about the work that we're going to do with Cynthia Nixon towards that end.
Welcome back to Inside City Hall. That, of course, was former City Council Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito yesterday endorsing Cynthia Nixon in the race for governor. It's part of a wave of endorsements that come in the wake of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's stunning victory against Joe Crowley in the Democratic congressional primary. Joining me now to talk about that and much, much more are the four members of our Monday Consultants Corner. We have on one side Republicans Molly Fullington and Michael Lawler, and across the table Democrats Alexis Grinnell and Nayela Amaru. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Sure. For having us.
And Nayela, welcome to you. Let's start with you. Do you think that the victory over Joe Crowley is going to unleash all kinds of perhaps endorsements that seemed riskier a couple of weeks ago?
I think that essentially this most recent endorsement in the broader scope doesn't mean much, primarily in that, you know, Mark Viverito is no longer the City Council Speaker. And so in terms of, I guess, the political tiers, if you will, the magnitude that maybe this type of endorsement would have had a year ago has changed. And also in terms of New York City voters versus upstate voters, she's tapping and speaking directly to a progressive base, which is for the most part focused here in New York City. So I don't think necessarily it's going to unleash a tirade of endorsements, if you will, and particularly in terms of being bold and progressive. It would have been bold and progressive had those endorsements happened before last Tuesday.
That's interesting, Molly. You're shaking your head, yes.
Well, I just think this whole thing is fascinating. I think she is a talent, Ocasio-Cortez, and I think anyone from any political persuasion should be excited about a young woman who is this passionate and this energetic and this talented getting into the political scene. I'm not a socialist, so I don't agree with her platform. That said, I think the repercussions for the Democrats is that it's showing the fissure within the party is deeper than we even realized.
To be clear, she's a Democratic socialist, which is actually different in many distinctive ways. And I actually think it is significant to see the former Speaker, Melissa Mark Viverito, come out. Melissa has always been a kind of anti-party, anti-county machine candidate, and she won the speakership without the support of the traditional Democratic establishment. So it seems like a natural fit to me to see her there, and she's now the head of the Latino Victory Fund. It's significant in that her focus is on securing Latino votes. And I think part of what Cynthia's calculus is going to be certainly is speaking to the constituency of outsiders, so to the Ocasio point, people who are not county insiders, but also women of color in particular, which has been Cynthia's strategy from the beginning.
And which is very effective in a Democratic gubernatorial primary.
Absolutely.
Sure. But Michael, look, Melissa Mark Viverito has a number of issues that she cares about. Puerto Rico is certainly one of them. Andrew Cuomo, I followed him down there. He's gone time and time again and really tried to say that, you know, I'm going to help out this community. Does this take away support of people who care about Puerto Rico or people who of Puerto Rican descent?
No, I don't think it takes away support per se. I think it's significant in the sense that you have, though she was somewhat of an outsider, she was the City Council Speaker. She is an establishment figure of some capacity, and she bucked the sitting governor of the state of New York. And I think what is fascinating about that is 4 years ago, that never would have happened against Zephyr Teachout. So people are not as afraid of Andrew Cuomo. They're not afraid of being bullied anymore. And I think what you're seeing is some of those people who, even though they're involved, and obviously as a former City Council Speaker, she is somewhat on the outside, but she is going right at Cuomo now, and she's going right at the establishment and trying to support an outsider candidate. And I think, to the point you were making earlier, she got elected without the institutional support. And I think this was her way of paying it back.
Molly, do you think that there's something, you were complimenting Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, does she play a dramatic role in the governor's race, the fact that she's endorsed Cynthia Nixon and there's all of this talk about her and she's seen as a new voice and someone who's willing to challenge authority?
I think she causes problems for the Democrat Party. I think this is just going to make it for Andrew Cuomo in specific. Yes, yes. And I think the party itself is splitting in ways that, you know, it's I'm sure it's tough for Democrats to watch. It's easier for Republicans to watch.
I think this is
it's
very
great for some Democrats. I'm just going to put it out there. As a Democrat, I'm excited and thrilled to see this energy, and particularly since it's so clearly led by women who were not supported by the establishment, not even by minor parties, not even by, you know, for sort of institutional entities of any kind, completely upend expectations, not by a little, but by a lot. And we see that all over the state.
We'll talk nationally after the break, but sticking locally, Nayela, do you think that this poses problems for Andrew Cuomo?
Ocasio-Cortez's
victory, the fact that she was so that she had just the previous day endorsed Cynthia Nixon and vice versa, and that all these people are now starting to support Cynthia Nixon.
Oh, I think it's about perspective. So I think on one hand, it's great for democracy that a young Latina from the Bronx can take on what is referred to as an establishment figure, and in doing so, she redefined in a lot of ways how we look at our campaigns, right? She reimagined who participates in democracy, and in doing so, redrew the electoral maps, which changed the win numbers, which should have a lot of establishment figures rethinking how they approach their own campaigns in terms of win numbers. On the other hand, I would push back and say I don't think that she's necessarily a bad thing or scary thing for the Democratic Party, because we are a big tent and we're a wide spectrum, from those of us who are on the left to those of us who are in the center, to those of us who encompass a really broad spectrum. But I think that this is a really interesting moment in history, because, you know, the fundamental difference between making history and you know, just another crazy idea is really believing that you can win. And she organized her campaign with this strategy in mind, and in doing so, again, changed the electoral.
She tweeted out her shoes that she used walking door to door. It's pretty incredible.
I would make 2 points. Number one, this is very reminiscent of the Tea Party fights from 2010. I think Joe Crowley is much like Eric Cantor. They lost sight of their district. They were traveling the country. They were trying to help Democrats nationally. All politics is still local at the end of the day. So I think that was a major factor in why she had this ability to win. I give her all the credit in the world for organizing and fighting and going out there and winning, ultimately. As relates to the governor, I think the governor's biggest problem is very simple. He doesn't have a core constituency that's energized to come out and vote for him. And I think what she has tapped into will be energized to vote for Cynthia Nixon. The one thing I'd say for him going in his favor, he has the firewall of the suburbs, and I don't think Nixon's policies will play well in Long Island and Westchester.
Okay, to be continued. Time now for a short break. I'll have more with these political strategists when we get back. Welcome back to Inside City Hall. I'm once again joined by the 4 members of our Monday Consultants Corner. Earlier on, I talked with a deputy mayor here in the city about another lead paint issue, or lead in kids' blood issue in the city, particularly when it comes to NYCHA. It just seems like there's 2 different stories at least. And as folks who work in the communications business trying to make things clear, this doesn't seem to be succeeding in City Hall. Would you agree?
I would. I mean, the only acceptable answer to kids being lead poisoned is, this is horrifying. I'm sorry. We're going to do everything we can to take care of this problem right away. I don't think that's what we're hearing coming out of City Hall, and I think hedging on sick kids is, aside from just the substance problem with that, is strategically also very, it's a bad look. It's just a bad look. Sick kids are awful. And this is obviously a place where there's a consent decree in place. The city's management of NYCHA has already been called into question by the U.S. Attorney and the Department of Justice, and it's just a problem that needs to be fixed. Explaining who's to blame is, I think, a bad idea.
The government has a fundamental job to keep people safe and keep people healthy. Clean water, we can all agree, is a fundamental responsibility of the government. The fact that you've had Flint, Michigan, Hoosick Falls, lead poisoning in New York City, it's unacceptable. And I think the mayor, more than anything, in my mind, is this is a progressive mayor who's advocating for big government expansion, government programs, government responsibility, and yet a fundamental job, which is to provide quality housing for these people in NYCHA, to provide quality clean water for kids in schools, and they're failing. And not only are they failing, they're not taking responsibility.
Well, the mayor would say, please.
I was going to say, I mean, this is the problem, right? There are sick kids, NYCHA's falling apart, and there's been a steady divestment in public housing from the federal government since Reagan, which is not something that is something you should say, you know, in a discussion about sick kids, but happens when we talk about the management question. It also is a lack of resources, and we all know that it's been, you know, shrinking systematically.
But then the city government needs to prioritize its own resources, and that's part of the problem.
It's interesting that you say the mayor says it often that this is a function of a lack of resources from the federal government. Do you agree, Nayela, that he shouldn't, when he's talking about all of these tremendous problems in NYCHA, he shouldn't talk about how Ronald Reagan and George Bush and so forth, you know, in his mind, starved NYCHA?
Well, I think it's important to recognize the relationship between the different levels of government, right? So when federal government makes a decision to disinvest, and that has a trickle effect to the state and to the local level. And I also think it's really important to build out the point that Alexis made earlier, is that this is, you know, NYCHA is under the spotlight now, but these issues that have been plaguing NYCHA have been happening for years in previous administrations. And so I think in terms of, I think it's important to look at that from the macro scale, that this is not something that just all of a sudden happened in the last 2 or 3 years.
Not as a partisan debate, as a policy problem, just to be clear.
I mean, my understanding is this was recognized in 2015, 2016, and it's taken us this long to figure out exactly what the problem is. This mayor has a problem admitting fault, and we've seen it over and over again, and he's stood behind people who are failing and defended them until he had no choice. But the public perception made him change his mind.
Yeah, the deputy mayor couldn't say anyone who had been punished because of this.
Well, I also think, you know, the first rule of crisis communications is say you're sorry and fix the problem. And he is not capable. I've seen it over and over again. These are smart people in City Hall. But the homelessness crisis, that's another thing. You know, the issue with Rikers Island last year.
This is the problem.
It's over and over again.
Politics, it's fundamental, which is that politicians don't want to be the one tagged with the blame and then have to stand for re-election.
But that's called leadership.
I agree. I'm calling it a problem.
Yes.
And I'm saying actually one of the great benefits, frankly, of the fact that the mayor is a second termer, he's not running for re-election. I do think there is more of an opportunity to seize that leadership opportunity that you point out, because you're right. There's sick kids. It's awful. I'm sorry. We have to fix the problem is really the only thing you need to say, or can be said.
He does want to be more of a player again nationally. Yep. Is this something that will come back to undermine his credibility as he speaks on a national stage? Let's, Nayela.
I think that any politician who has ambitions always has to be aware of their record, because press money votes is oftentimes the lens through which politicians make their decisions. And, you know, it's moving the needle. And so I think that any politician, and if the mayor, you know, in fact has national ambition, this is definitely certainly an issue that he needs to get behind and make it work in terms of throwing the gauntlet down versus, you know, the perception to the point that's been made is that the perception is that, you know, government has been kicking the can down the road and not necessarily been trying to fix the problem until it became public.
Okay. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. A lot of stuff to go over. We're going to take a break. Coming up, Mexico just elected a controversial new president. So what does that mean for the U.S.-Mexico relationship? We're going to talk it over with an expert. Stay with us.